Okay, I would like to open up this May lit event with thanks to Neptune Grill, who's hosting us and will be hosting us until December. I'd like to thank the Blueberry Patch for allowing this to happen as well. Martha Muzzy, Kurt Thompson on video, and I'm Ian O'Hara. Anyways, today we're going to be talking a little bit about William Carlos Williams. William Carlos Williams was born September 17th, 1883 in Rutherford, New Jersey. His background is actually a really amazing background. His mother is Puerto Rican and mixed between French Basque and Dutch Jewish. And she was dark, she was light, she was impressive, and she was a powerhouse. And she was married to a deserter, a dud, who has probably one of the greatest ancestries in American history, dating all the way back to the great Roger Williams, founder of the Providence Colony. But anyways, at the age of... Okay. Anyways, at the age of 6, his mother moved, who's English, moves to Puerto Rico, and this is his grandmother, excuse me. And so there's already issues with marriage and being around the presence of early feminism. Anyways, he starts to write nightly approximately the age of 6. He doesn't call it daily writing or daily journaling, he calls it nightly journaling. And he spends the rest of his life essentially writing everything that he's ever written at night. And he wrote daily from about 1890 to about 1906, just on the random stuff of what was going on in his life. He was educated in Rutherford schools, went to Geneva Secondary in Lucerne, Switzerland, in 1899. This is where he becomes friends with the Manleys and the Manns, and moves to Paris with his mother, and ends up at Lucerne, which is a junior school, and then moves back to New York and graduates from Horace Mann School in 1901. Passes the special exam with the highest score in science and medicine, and enters the University of Pennsylvania on a full scholarship, and graduates there with his MD in 1906. While he's at University of Pennsylvania, he meets Ezra Pound, who becomes his lifelong friend. And with his connections to the Manleys and the Manns, who was Horace Mann Jr., he delves into what his father's tradition, his deserter father's tradition, which was Unitarian Universalism. And I would say this is approximately 1906, 1907. He starts a group called the Imaginists, which is a school of thought on a new way of writing. And it's essentially what it's based upon is free verse, imagery, precision, and clean and sharp language detail. This would eventually become what is today American modernism. He is the founder, with Ezra Pound, of American modernism in writing. But he goes a little bit further than Ezra Pound. Ezra Pound just focuses in on letters. He decides to go a little above and beyond and create a larger school of thought when it comes to art in general. So he gets together with a group called the Eiffel Tower Group. And this wonderful group of people, come on in. So he starts this Eiffel Tower Group as well, which is essentially taking all of the romantic and pre-Raphaelite ideals and cramming into modernist thoughts of study of ancient times, study of grandeur and glory, and putting it into modern terms. Never done before. He did it. So he does his internship. All of this going on, he's studying to be a doctor. And he's at the French Hospital and Child's Hospital in New York City, both of which are not there anymore. And in 1909, he goes to Leipzig, Germany, to study advanced pediatrics. And while he's there, he bumps into Ezra Pound and Ezra Pound's fiancée, Hilda Doolittle. Hilda Doolittle has a connection to, of course, some of the great leaders of feminism, Unitarianism, and foundations of the cultural elite of New England. At the same time, he writes and publishes his first book called Poems. Meets his wife Florence Herman. And Florence, how could we say? Florence is the woman of her time. She's a Victorian in tradition. Mother, wants to be a mother and a wife, and has really no interest in the nonsense of the frivolities of culture. Anyways, so in 1912, they get married. They return back to Rutherford, New Jersey, to his hometown. He writes and publishes his second book. At that time, it was published by London Press. It's called The Tempers. And London Press was owned by Ezra Pound. And in 1911, Hilda Doolittle and what eventually would become her husband, put together a magazine called Poetry Magazine, which is still in existence today. And it all came out of this Eiffel Tower Group. Hi, Paul. How are you?
Good. I found it.
Yeah, welcome.
Thank you.
So, and this is in 1911, 1912. And in 1913, William Carlos Williams meets Alfred Stirlitz, who writes a list called the 291 Circle, the best writers of the time, and puts William Carlos Williams on that list. Remember, by this point in time, he had only written and published 2 books. But because of his foundation of including not only literature and the letters, but the arts into everything, into these broad groups, he was on that list. Now remember, he's still involved with the Imaginists. He's still involved with the Eiffel Tower Group. He's writing at night. He's a pediatrician by day. He's married. And in 1914, he has his first son, William Edward Williams. In 1915, he begins to associate himself with a very, very avant-garde group called the Others. Others is very, very important in reference to American and European cultural history. These are people who are not only men and women of the left, but also men and women who would create a brand new musical and art movement called the Dadaist period. And create some of the best art and avant-garde art magazines in the world, like the Gallup, like the Paris Review. So he meets Alfred Cronenberg and again rekindles his relationship with Alfred Steinmetz, and he becomes known, William Carlos Williams becomes known as the Old Bull, and the two Alfreds put this together. And he's walking beside Man Ray and Walter Arnold and Wallace Stevens and Mariana Moore, who we spoke about a couple of months back, Marcel Duchamp, and so these groups become larger. Not only does he begin to put together a school, essentially, school in a smaller case, S. Now people are becoming more and more interested in the art at the time. So this is approximately 1915. 1917, he writes and publishes his first French poem, and then has his second son, Paul Williams, who today is a doctor right here in Florida. In 1919, he publishes his first critical work, and his critical work is essentially critiques of his fellow writers, the men and women that he shares the table with every night, and they weren't kind. And William Carlos Williams, at this particular point in time, becomes known as a critic. Maybe we could say the Dorothy Parker of the group. And this Imaginist group falls apart and rekindles into American modernism. And in 1920, he writes and publishes Kona in Hell, Improvisations, which is essentially telling the reader that what he's written in the past and what others have written in the past is crap. It's time for something new. And that we need to focus in on the new generation that's coming up. And then the Imaginists put together a magazine called The Little Review, and he's the first person to be published in that. And in 21 as well, he publishes Sour Grapes and starts the collected poems. These are poems that he had written when he was young, at the age of 6. Some one-liners. I'm going to leave you with that. I'm going to have Martha Muzzy come up and maybe give us a whirl on some of his early writings. And we'll be back for the second half.
Tijan,